So would like to tell you about a program that I've been developing and with my colleagues in Rotterdam. Where are you, Monique? Where is she? Oh, Monique and Esther are here from who are my collaborators, along with Nick Conman in Rotterdam. And so I talk about this. The purpose of this program, in a way, was to develop good quality education for people of all disciplines working in any newborn hospital setting at any level, anywhere, to get them started in the right direction. I've done a lot of work around the world in many different settings where they're keen to take developmental care forward but don't have the resources to do it. You know, Moscow, Armenia, New Zealand, Australia, all over the place. They're at different levels, and in Italy and Ireland. So, and different hospitals and different countries have different needs to get started. Also, we were aware of the fact, being a NIDCAP trainer and seeing what happens when you have people who are trained in NIDCAP, it isn't always easy for them to bridge the gap between themselves and the rest of the team. So we wanted a program that would support professional roles, specialist roles, such as the NIDCAP professional, by helping them to reach out to the rest of the team where that's needed. And we also wanted to make something that would build sustainability into family integrated neurodevelopmental care education. So tomorrow, at the meeting tomorrow, I'll talk a lot more and get some feedback from you on the reasons for doing this and what works and what different people need. Historically, it does go back quite a way, because this little girl who was born at 23 weeks gestation is now 16 years old, and it was round about when she was born that I first started out on this quest at St Mary's. And when we became a NIDCAP centre, I was asked to develop a curriculum that was less advanced, and in 2010 I proposed that curriculum to Imperial College Continuing Professional Development School. And they liked it very much, and we began with that. But then more recently, I've had a more profitable collaboration with Rotterdam, and we've developed the FINE program, and we've run pilots in the UK, in the Netherlands, also in Serbia. Milica and Maya here, they can tell you about that. And we're also now getting very good support from the EFCNI and also from Bliss in the UK and in France. Jacques and Natalie in France are running a pilot there as well. So we're not finished with the development, but we're getting close, I hope, to having it more formalized. We wanted also to think of education as a pathway. And this is the pathway described, it's adapted from Benner's stages of clinical competence, where you see the first level of education being for the novice. Well, when we proposed that, nobody liked to be called a novice. So we thought, I'll find another name for that, and we talk about the foundations of knowledge. The second level up in her model is called advanced beginner. People didn't like that very much either. So we thought, actually, this is about developing your practice, so that became practical skills. These two levels are the levels that we have in place now. We would then like to develop a third level, which we will call innovation, which will be more of a modular level, which will be to help people with leadership and change management and things like that. Level 4, proficient, and level 5, expert in her levels. Well, for me, that equates to NIDCAP professionals and NIDCAP trainers, but in other disciplines and other projects that might be different. But it's the more specialist, advanced skills that we're talking about there. And we're talking about the pathway that you need to go through before you can get to that level. Over the time, I've thought long and hard about what are all the essential themes of good family-centred developmental care. And one of them seems to be, first of all, you need to have a knowledge of infant development, fetal and infant development. And it's been our experience, and I've been very surprised about this, how many professionals in the neonatal unit have very little knowledge about this. And I was even interested to know that even neonatologists don't know about brain development. They know about MRI scans and they know about ultrasounds, but they don't know about a lot of the other things that Petra told us about this morning. They're not yet all aware of this. But a lot of people are not aware of the developmental backgrounds. We felt that was a basic. Observation, it's been a theme that's come up on almost every presentation that we've had so far, is the importance of observing the baby and also observing the interaction between the baby and the mother. And the third thing that's very important is the family participation and the family confidence as working with families. Reflection, we decided, was also a strong component of this, and that is something else that's come up from all the other talks this morning. Having an evidence base so that what you're doing, you can be backed up by strong evidence, and also an understanding of systems. And woven into all of that is a basic understanding. It's not about the walls and the light and all of that stuff. It's about relationships. And it was joy that made me think about putting that in as a sort of something that covers everything. The relationships are part of everything. So we started to think about which steps. So the first step we call the foundations, we call it the foundation toolkit. Many centres will be able to run foundation courses like this. The one we run is a 2-day course which involves presentations and workshops. But different centres would run them in different ways. It's important that the same themes run through all of them. In the foundations, however, the 2 boxes here that are outlined in pink, infant development and evidence, those are the 2 that take precedence for this particular level of the course. We want to make sure that people have the information about infant development, and they have the information about evidence. All the rest comes into it, but those 2 things are emphasized. It's a fairly flexible format, and this is all multidisciplinary, although I have to say that we have found that doctors are not so likely to participate in this framework, and we're thinking of developing a slightly different one for them. It can be adapted to different locations. It doesn't matter what kind of unit, whether you're a level 1, level 2, level 3, or pediatric intensive care, they could all do it. At this level, a lot of the teaching can be done in the classroom. And it involves team teaching. So we have a team of people doing the teaching, running the workshops, and it's through the team teaching that they become more proficient teachers and mentors for the next level up. And we try to make the teaching as interactive as possible. What we want to kind of cover here in terms of the raising the scope and awareness is that people understand the neuroprotection basics. You've got to have a physiologically stable baby. You don't want the heart rate going right up and down, intracranial pressure going right up and down. It's not good for the brain. And so developmental care can help you to manage that. Stress and pain are a huge topic and very important in terms of thinking about how the brain. Nourishment also very important, and I don't mean just what kind of food you put into the baby. I mean, how does that baby digest that food? Because that's one of the main things I often find myself focusing on, is this poor child can't digest his food properly because of what's going on. So how do we help that? How do we help the baby to conserve energy so they can use those calories for growing? And then also about obviously breastfeeding and so on. The sensory environment, sleep is a huge issue from terms of development, brain development, and then outlined in black, because it's that much more important than everything else probably, is closeness to the family. So those are all basic topics that we bring up in this beginning. And what our objectives are that at this phase 1, step 1, is that people will be aware of the scope, the theory and the evidence behind family-centered care, and that we give that to them through lectures, and we give them good references, and we provide core reading material as well. And then the next objective is to understand the components of good practice, and we try to give them that through demonstrations and interactive workshops with dolls and through videos and things like that. And we're also hoping that people will be more aware of their own practice, and we give them that through self-evaluation exercises and making action plans for them. What we often find is people say, oh yes, I'm going to go back and I'm going to change the lighting. No, you're not. It isn't going to work like that. What are you going to do in your day-to-day practice? How are you going to change? So those are the kind of objectives that we hope to raise awareness of in the first, in the introductory level at foundations. Now the next step up is a much bigger step, and this is where we're at the moment trialing this out in more detail. And here the same 6 themes operate, but here there's more emphasis on observation, the family, and reflection. Again, any discipline can take part of this, and you have to have done step 1 before you do this, because we found that if you don't know the background information, then you can't make good use of this. It involves about 12 to 18 hours of face-to-face contact time with your tutor and mentor, and then about 30 to 50 hours of self-directed study in the nursery, mostly with babies, observing babies and working with families. And it takes place, there are lesson plans for 12 weeks. Each week is very structured, and they have very structured assignments to do. And they have a mentor who they should send their weekly reflections to their mentor. I was very struck, it's very similar to what Kari was saying, how they'd adapted the teaching of the ENBO in the same way that they have the weekly logs that you send in and are reviewed, and you get feedback from your mentor. We're doing the same thing, and we didn't know. It was a completely separate decision. And the objectives here is to be aware of and ready to change your own practice. And we hope that that is achieved through the reflection and the mentoring part of the process. We want people to be more able to see the infant as an active communicator. And we hope that that will come through observation and reflection on the observations. We want them to think much more about being partners with and learning from parents. And that involves active listening and engaging parents and parent participation. We've found quite often that people were saying that they found it difficult to know what to say to parents, difficult even to know how to get the conversation going. So we've given them quite a lot of prompts to help with that. And the other thing that we found was that people see themselves, you hear this a lot, we need to educate the parents about the baby's behavior. And they need to get rid of that idea, because actually it's the other way around. The parents can educate us about the baby. To get people to give up the idea of being educators and to be listening and being learners has been quite hard. And we also hope that they will identify the strengths and challenges in their team, and we do give them some tools for evaluating practice and for assessing their site. So that's the sort of the objectives. Each week has a lesson plan, and they're provided with a very structured workbook. And at each week there's a competency which we hope they will achieve, and then the themes, the 6 themes come up again. They're given some brief information about the topic for the week. They have a bedside observation assignment. They have suggestions for family participation. They have some prompting for reflective notes which they send to their mentor. They have some recommended reading around the topic for the week, and they have some SICE assessment tools also relevant to the topic for the week. And then at the end of that course there is an evaluation process. The completed assignments are checked. They have to make sure that all the reflections have been checked and the feedback has been given. We do a video exercise assessment in a group, so that we show a video and then have a discussion about, what we've seen and relate that to what they've learnt. They do a self-assessment to evaluate their own view of their change in practice. They evaluate the readings that we give them, and that's, of course, we've made the readings optional because we know that in some countries there are not readings in the local language available, and people can't do that. We're lucky in France you do have readings, don't you? But in some countries there isn't a suitable body of reading for people, so it has to be optional. But where they can, they evaluate the usefulness, and interestingly, different people find different papers useful. There's no consistency about that. And then we have an overall course evaluation, course assessment for the students to fill in, and in Rotterdam they're collecting data for us to be able to evaluate that. Typical kind of comments that we get from people about the changes in practice are things like, oh, I thought I used to watch babies. I was always thinking I used to watch babies, but now I really do. I watch before I start the cares. And then this is one of the big things. If they're sleeping, I let them rest. And so many people said, but I feel really awkward. I think my colleagues think I'm being lazy because I go and look at the baby and then I don't do the care. And they're thinking, why isn't she doing the cares? So it takes a little while before their colleagues begin to realize that, that this is best for the baby, but it's a little bit awkward at first. We ask them, the observations in the beginning are only 2 minutes long. You'd be surprised how long many people find 2 minutes to actually stand and watch a baby. Some people find it extremely difficult. So watching babies is quite a revelation to a lot of people. That's a common comment. And the other thing is that people are, when they start to be asking parents all the time and watching babies with parents, is how amazed they are about how much parents know about their babies, which is, also so they're so surprised about, but it's quite interesting that this is another thing that is quite common. The pain management thing we found is very different in different settings because in Rotterdam they have a much better pain management policies and practices than in some of the units that I'm working in. And most of my students working in the UK have come back and said, we definitely need to do something about pain management on our unit, and that's sort of become a priority. And they're more inclined to ask somebody to help them when the baby is having some sort of challenging care, and hopefully that will be the parents. Organization-wide, this is why we're kind of thinking about how this will be structured, that we will, in Rotterdam, we'll probably have a board that will decide whom can have the license to implement this, to carry this forward. And then when we have granted the license, the people who are licensed will be able to choose who they think will be suitable for coordinating it in their country, and they will choose local course leaders who they feel will be capable of running it, and those people will choose local teaching teams to do it, and hopefully, rather, as Kari was saying, from the NBO, you hope to pick from that really competent people who will be able then to become more able to lead and contribute to the teaching the next time around. So that's the kind of pathway we're looking at in terms of making this sustainable and distributing it and making it more available. Well, we found quite a few challenges, which of course vary according to the setting. For doctors and nurses have found it quite difficult to manage some of the time. This is also quite personable about time management. We tried to design it so many of the assignments could be done in very, very much in the working day. So they were designed to be very short and they could be fitted in to the working day. And that sometimes has worked well in the beginning, but not with some of the more difficult assignments later. Dealing with colleagues' perceptions of if you've been the first one in your unit to be observing babies and observing them during interventions. Some people have found that their colleagues felt a bit uncomfortable about that for a while. There's been some pressure from management. I'm sending you on this course. I expect you to come back and change everything. without actually knowing what they want to achieve or what they want to change, but they somehow think there'll be instant change. This question about wanting to teach, and when this is not a course for teachers, we're not training teachers, we're asking people to think about their own practice, not to become teachers. And we're basing that on education these days in the UK anyway. The theme that comes up is you teach by demonstrating good behavior. So that we're hoping people will develop their practice and people will say, oh, I like the way she behaves, I like the way she looks after the baby, I like the way she communicates with the parents, I want to be like that. So we're hoping that will catch on. A lot of people found reflecting very difficult. I think that neonatology is quite protocol orientated, and it's very nurses are expected to follow routines. It's quite difficult to stop and think about what you're doing, and it was quite surprising to us actually how difficult people find reflection, and that is why we had to build in the prompts. So every week we ask questions so that they have some sort of a structure, really, a scaffold to help them with their reflections. We also are concerned about what happens if everybody has to do it, or should it be voluntary? Should everybody on the unit do this? Well, ideally, yes, but is it going to work as well as it might do if you are just doing it because you want to? So that's another question. The readings I've referred to. The problem we're coming up against is the demand is growing enormously, and we're going to have to need to build teams, a bigger and bigger faculty in order to meet the demand, and faculties that can work in different languages. I'm at the moment building a group who can do it in Greek. Monique's working with a group that can do it in German, so we're having to think about that as well. But I'd like to finish really by talking about some of the strengths, what we found has worked really well. In the evaluations, this program has scored very high on students feeling that it's very relevant to their practice and satisfaction. They also found that it was very easy to follow. The instructions were very clear, so it was easy to follow. The individualized support, I think, has been one of the big strengths. Some people need a lot more mentoring and support than others, and that's how we can individualize the program. And that's also how we evaluate the students, really. It's through mentorship that we understand how they're getting on and how it's working for them. It's also been very good that it's been multidisciplinary. So in each group we've had therapists as well as nurses and sometimes psychologists or doctors. So and the teachings is also multidisciplinary. We have doctors, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists, and parents even involved in the teaching. It's eclectic. We've taken ideas from many, many sources. So, we're very indebted to the close collaboration program. We've learned a lot from that. From the NIDCAP, we've learned a lot from that. From the Brazelton, we've learned a lot from that. So we've learned a lot from listening, coming actually to these meetings and hearing people present different programs. That's very much helped us to shape some of our ideas and some of the and the assignments. Peer support, the group meetings is something we'd like to build on. One of our groups used WhatsApp as a free texting service as a group, and they were amazing because they came from 12 different hospitals. None of them knew each other before. By the time they'd finished, they were all bonded. They were texting each other every day. They ganged up on myself and the other mentor and kind of told us what they wanted. It was, very good. So we're thinking about building that into other groups as well, but finding a way for peer support. It's also, we're hoping that it will start to create more interest in more advanced training, and that has been the case. And we've had, both in the Netherlands, in the UK, we've had more inquiries about NIDCAP training as a result of people following this course. And we think it'll be helpful for us also to determine which people are going to be successful. Because if you can't follow this course, then you aren't going to be able to follow a more advanced course. So it's good preparation in that way. It's quite flexible as to, I tend to be with groups from different hospitals. Monique, and you've been doing it, haven't you, more with groups in a single hospital? You can do it in, and I've, done it in Serbia and in London. And so it's, you do it in completely different settings. And the other thing is also, it seems to have quite a low attrition rate in that most people seem to finish, which is, I think we've had very few dropouts. I think I've only had one for personal reasons. No, that's not true. I've had a few more than that. So next steps. Well, we've got a few legalities to settle to deal with copyright issues and contracts and things like that. We'll make a final review of the materials probably when Natalie has finished her first group in France, and we've got feedback from that. Also, our colleague and I wrote a book for parents, which is about, basically it's developmental care for parents. It's about what, parents' engagement with what they can do with their baby and how to support their baby in the neonatal unit. And we're linking these two together. So the book will go to be designed by a graphic designer, and the graphic design is going to be linked, we hope, in some way to this book, so they're perceived as a family. So that when we train people, we actually give them the book as well, so they have a resource for parents as well as their own handbook. We have to decide on the criteria as to who will have the licenses for this, and we obviously have to prioritize our resources into terms of where we do with it. Building teaching teams is quite a big issue, and I'm working to build a faculty of about 22 people for the UK so that we can take this forward. Doctors group, we're thinking of, I've got a group of doctors who are interested in adapting this program. We'd much rather they did the whole thing and with everybody else, but the reality is they don't. So we need to think about introducing something else to get them involved. Translations, there's quite a lot of materials, so the EFC and I are very kindly offered to help with translating it into different languages and also facilitating the organization of courses in other countries, because in countries where it's not financially viable to spend a lot of money on developmental care training. We also need to think about how we evaluate the impact. So this is, some ideas have come up today. We need to talk to some people about that. And, for me in particular, I have to think about succession planning. So, who is the next generation who's going to take this forward? And that was one of the things really that impelled Björn and I to think about this whole day is, who are you in the future who are going to take these things forward? You can see from me, oh good, we've got a volunteer up there. But I think that's really important to think about who is the next generation who are going to lead these things forward. So thank you.